In this episode, I have the opportunity to speak with Alex Hagerup, who is solving the problem of using AI to take costs out of your business.
Welcome to ClickAI Radio, where you'll learn the secrets to transforming your small to medium business. Grant has been helping businesses transform using technology for over 30 years. Advanced technologies like artificial intelligence have been available only to large companies and advanced technical teams. Grant will discuss how you can use to leverage AI and other technologies to grow your small to medium business. As a gift, Grant is offering his ebook, AI for Sales Growth, at clickairadio.com. Now, here's your host and biz tech geek, Grant Larson.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of ClickAI Radio. So today I have someone that I have been admiring by looking at his background here with me today to talk about some amazing aspects of his journey to solve business problems leveraging technology, specifically AI, which is quite cool. Anyway, let me stop right there and welcome Alex Hagerup. Hello, Alex.
Hey, Grant. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
Thank you. Thanks for being here today and for taking the time. I know you're getting ready to head off transcontinental here pretty soon on a trip. So thanks for jumping on this conversation here today.
Absolutely. It's exciting being able to travel again. So going home to the Motherland for a few weeks is exciting. I haven't been there for more than a few days over the last 3 years, actually. So I'm definitely excited.
Have the COVID situations, those numbers pretty good over there at this point?
Yeah, everything is fine. So Norway is completely open again, and it's all good. But Norway was one of those countries that really locked down hard, and also since the US didn't allow non-US residents to actually come back into the country if you left, it was just a problematic situation to go to Europe in general.
Wow. Yeah. What a great opportunity to get home to family. Well, thanks for taking your time here with me today on this. So Vic AI. All right. Who is Vic AI? What happened here? What are you solving? What problem are you looking to address with Vic AI?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll take a little bit of the background to set that up. So I've always been very interested in both accounting, finance, and technology. So this is a company that lives in the intersection of those. My mom had her own accounting firm, so I grew up there, which probably influenced my interest for accounting in general. And I built a couple of companies, but one that I spent 3 years with just prior to starting VKI was a cloud ERP system.
Oh,
so
really?
An accounting platform that was being used by about 40,000 companies back then. It's about 90,000 now. And during working there, we observed the sort of, let's say, the challenges of accounting and the manual repetitiveness, the tediousness, all of that from, every day you felt it. And
where's the excitement? Where's the excitement in that, right? Yeah.
Where's the excitement in that?
Did you credit that properly, Grant? Oh gosh.
Yeah, exactly. So we were just observing this, and then this was back in 2014, 15, just before we started with AI, and AI started having a new like a new summer or a new renaissance in a way. And we were thinking like, this has to be, we can solve this in a better way than how the technology has solved it so far. And after some deliberation, we sort of thought that we could create AI algorithms that would be able to actually do accounting transaction processing better than humans.
So let's stop right there, because that's a really key point I think you're making. So the way that we've been solving this problem up to this point has been, let me take the tasks that we do and just automate the tasks themselves, right? In other words, let me take your actual transactional activities that you're working through and just put some increased processing to that. That's how it's historically been done, right?
Yeah, correct. And that's been entirely driven by rules, right? So, transaction, Uber, transportation. It's like, rules-based automation.
Right.
And there are all sorts of problems with that. It's obviously better than doing everything manually, right? So we're progressing through stages here. If you go back before the spreadsheet, everything was done entirely manually. So we are progressing here, but what we're building is that next phase that comes after, what everyone is using today all over the world. And AI will solve this in a more scalable and gracious way and more effectively. So that was our idea.
Yeah. So real quick on that, can you articulate how is that different, right? Because all of us come from this rules-based way of thinking. So what is it that AI is going to do better? How will it do it differently than what we're used to?
Yeah, I mean that's a great question. It's kind of the essence as well. So when you look at how it happens today, it's not only rules or not only automation, it's automation and a lot of human hours involved. So you can always ask yourself, why are all those human hours involved if it's automation? Right. Yeah. So it begs the question, right? So what happens in reality is that sort of rules and templates and RPA isn't sufficient because there's so many edge cases and there's so much variability in the world of accounting. So, rules only takes you so far, and then you have to staff up and have human cognitive reasoning step in and do the rest of it. So where AI comes in is that it can do both of those things. So it does the automation without rules, and it can do the reasoning that humans are there to do today. So I always say that AI is great at sort of mimicking that reasoning that humans are doing. So one of the areas that we're in is invoice processing. And when I give an invoice to any human, it will always tell me, oh, that's the vendor, that's the invoice number, or that's the total cost. But that's not obvious to a computer. And if you're going to write rules for every variability in the world, you just end up writing too many rules. So it's just not a great technology for it. And AI is way better. So it's just like in the early stages of that next sort of digital transformation journey that we're on.
So as you know, when you're working in the AI space and you're saying, oh, I'm going to apply AI to a particular problem, you end up building different models with different AI characteristics based on the nature of the problem. Some more regression based, some more sort of classification based. As your people, as your customers look to use your platform, do they get exposed to any of that? Are they even aware of what elements or aspects of AI are at play? Or do they just jump in and start solving the problems they're used to, and then the right sort of AI model behind the scene is executing on their behalf?
Yeah, we've hidden all of that from our customers. So we do try to keep sort of explainable AI in a way where our user interface is explaining why our AI predicted something. But we've kept all of the complexities of sort of models and model training and all of that is in the background. We decided to do like an end-to-end service where the customer, they don't really need to do anything technical. It's just another SaaS subscription that they're using that they plug into one of their processes, and then we deal with all of the complexity of the models, both global models and AI models specifically designed for each customer. So we keep all of that complexity hidden.
That's awesome. That way I'm not touching any of that as the end user. So if I see the name Vic AI, I don't need to shy away and say, oh, wait, I need to be an AI expert. It's more that this is the enabling technology, and it just turns out that you've made that simple for the people without needing to know that. Wait a minute. So that brings a question to my mind. As you know, one of the challenges around AI is the whole notion around bias and with the cognizance that's required for humans up to this point, and still largely today, to do accounting processes. Therefore, that has the opportunity for some bias that comes in, right, in terms of the way things get handled. How do you deal with that then in terms of applying AI so that that bias doesn't creep through?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's a challenge for everything where data sets are involved in training AI. So one of the ways that one of the good things with accounting data, if we start with that, is that it's ultimately numbers and classifications, and you kind of want to have that right, because otherwise your books of your business is wrong. So unless you want them to be wrong, you have a very good incentive to keep this right. So I think we generally see kind of less bias in accounting data than some other more like subjective data in a way. And then also we draw on data across thousands and thousands of customers. So we have customers in both Europe and the US and many other regions as well, but a little fewer. Most of the concentration in Europe and US, and in all sorts of industries and all sorts of sizes. We have about 13,000 customers on the platform now. So when you start looking at such a wide data set, you also hopefully reduce some of that bias. And then you also have auditing processes that sort of sits at the end after accounting, and hopefully also they'll annually they'll catch corrections, and those are fed in as well to ClickAI. So those are some of the tactics. Basically, it's all about keeping clean data so that our predictions are accurate. That's really what we're trying to get to.
Yeah, boy, that's so critical, especially as you pointed out with the need to, of course, be accurate for the business, for sure. All right, so let's say that you've got this data, you've cleaned it up, you've done the preparation, you're on the ClickAI platform. The question now in my mind becomes, therefore, what changes in the lives of the people that adopt this, right? In other words, they may change, I'm supposing, something about the way they do their daily work, or the way the CFO does certain things, or maybe even impact on regulations and audits. I mean, what's the impact of the organization when this gets adopted?
Yeah, awesome question. And I want to point out also that the beginning of getting live with ClickAI isn't complex for a customer, because we've built an automated system to ingest and clean their historical data, which then goes into our system automatically and train our AI algorithms, so that when we go live, we have pretty good knowledge of what's going to be predicted. We know your system, we know your accounting, we know how you do things. So when you start pushing new transactions through, our classification accuracy is high, and there's no complexity for the customer in that process. It basically happens automatically in the background. Once you are live with ClickAI, some things will change, but it doesn't sort of change like overnight. One of the things with AI is it gets better and better over time. And one of the things we're driving towards is what we call full autonomy. And full autonomy is, the AI's version of automation, but it means that it has perceived this not to need human review. And that's when it's fully autonomous. So that's our sort of end goal with the autonomy of transactions, is that, the AI system is perfectly confident in the work that it has been doing. So it doesn't even ask a human to review it. So this increases over time. So when you start with ClickAI, you have a better interface, you have a smoother operation, you have already probably 50% time reduction in the first month of using the system.
Hey, so let me stop you on that right there. 50%. So that would be 50% of those that are doing sort of the daily operational activities, or is that of the CFO, or who is that 50% impacting?
Yeah, that's on the accounting team that is doing the processing. So if you're doing, if you have 5 people or if you have 15 people doing invoice processing, whether they are onshore or offshore, just in the beginning, you can drastically reduce that. And then that percentage just increases over time, because you're substituting the AI for human FTEs, basically. And what we see is that everyone wants to do something else than just sit and do like data entry and accounting classification, right? You can be more proactive. You can do more value added work than that. And we're sort of at that phase now where the AI can substitute that, partly augment and also fully run things autonomously. So when you put this in place, in the beginning, there is a little bit of effect right away, but you got to redesign some of your processes and some of your routines, because you have a platform here now that is doing most of the work for you, and you're just reviewing the AI and training the AI to become autonomous. So you got a little mind shift, and some sort of routines. You don't need to double and triple check and have 4 people involved in reviewing one thing, because the AI can tell you how confident it is. And if it is very confident, maybe you can have one person review it in the beginning, and then eventually it will be fully autonomous. If it's less confident, then it will also tell you, and you can review it in more detail. So it's pretty fascinating.
It's staying fascinating. And I'm assuming that there are some that have run into this and they've worried about their jobs, right? They're like, wait a minute, you're taking my tasks away from me. Do you have to help them overcome that fear and say, hey, you're going to move towards more value added activities within the organization? Have you run into that problem?
So what we see is that it's everyone is just squeezed on time, right? Everyone's trying to hit the deadline of the monthly close and all of that. So there is no shortage of work to be done in the accounting teams. And just having having faster turnaround time, having more accurate data, because the AI is more accurate than humans. Like, it doesn't fat finger things the same way. And when it's uncertain, it asks for a human verification. A human looks at it, and then you get it more accurate than otherwise. So we see that there's no shortage of things to do. Everyone wants to progress their careers. And I don't really perceive that as an actual problem, but it is like people will think about that as a problem, but I don't think it is in reality.
So this has been several years in coming. When did you start this? 3 years ago?
Yeah, early 2017 was 2017? When we
5 years
incorporated.
Ago. Okay, that's awesome. And you built this ground up, meaning all of the AI development is AI technology that your organization's created, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it's been challenging. That's why it's taken quite a few years as well, is because you started it completely at scratch, and we had to figure everything out. So one of the things that sets ClickAI apart a little bit is part of our founding story, where we were able to start the company. We had access to a gigantic data set of accounting transactions and all corresponding documents to that. So that helped us just spend the first 2 years. We just spent on data analysis, data science, and machine learning development, because we had some thesis and theories that this could work, but we didn't know. So we just had to do that in the beginning for a couple of years. And when we saw that this actually has promise, like we're predicting more and more accurately, and we're going to get to this inflection point where it's better to use ClickAI than to not use ClickAI. And at that point, people will use it, and then we'll continue growing, more and more customers and more data and more corrections and better predictions. So we realized we would get to that point, and then we raised the seed round back in 2017 and started developing.
What a great journey. I love this story. So tell me about impact, outcomes. So you talked about a large number of customers that are using the platform now. What's been the results that they've seen?
Yeah, so we see. So there's a couple of numbers that we statistically can draw from the customers. We see that customers have about 80% reduction in the overall time spent on the process, and that comes from 2 things. One is the percent of fully autonomous. So let's say you're at 50% fully autonomous. That means you spend 0 time on 50% of your volume. And then that other part, we've drastically reduced the number of minutes into seconds for each transaction a human has to review, because the AI has done all the upfront work. Humans just reviewing it rather than sort of processing it from scratch. So you're at seconds rather than minutes. This turns into sort of an 80% reduction in time. You also have things that we do, like prevent duplicate payments, and we have some fraud detection in the system. So you also have some of those benefits that can turn into multi-million-dollar when you have a large enough cost base. And then we have audit trails in the system, which helps with figuring out, making sure that all of the approvals are doing right. If anyone has changed an amount or something, it's all logged in the system electronically. So you have some compliance and auditing benefits from it as well. But right now, the main effect and impact our customers have, and we typically sell to the mid-market and enterprise. So these are larger organizations. They can have hundreds of thousands or millions even of sort of vendor bills per year, and a substantial amount of people and resources involved in dealing with that problem. So they see very significant ROI from it.
So to sell into that particular group, then I'm assuming you've got to have a decent amount of integrations into all of their incumbent systems, right? All of their ERP systems and CRM systems, et cetera. I mean, what does that look like?
Yeah, that's true. So we build out these connectors as we go. It does for each connector, the first time we build it, it does take a little bit of time. And then once we have that connector, for instance, to NetSuite or Intact or Oracle, the next customers that we bring on board, we can leverage the same connector. So it is some work initially to build out all of the ones that we need. And then you can grow and scale on top of that. For the customer, this is no complexity. Like, we're taking that on completely. So the only thing we need is to know what type of system they have, and we develop that connector as part of the offering.
So let's talk about looking to the future in terms of when I'm doing FP&A, financial planning and analysis, and I'm looking at my numbers and I want to leverage a view into the future. How does something like this help an organization with that?
Yeah, that's a beautiful question and a big passion of mine, actually. So what we're doing now sets us up to solve that specific problem. So if you think of where we are now, we're in accounting, and what you're talking about is more finance, which is what we'll dive into. The idea and the vision that we are getting to is that we want to develop an AI that basically is a real-time cost optimization engine that serves predictions and monitors that in real time. We will be able to help you project kind of what your cost base should be, and how you could reduce spend in various categories and with various vendors. That's the piece that we're trying to solve as part of that equation of the future. So you always have multiple pieces of the accounting equation. You have the cost side, you have the revenue side, you have adjustments and close process, and we're trying to stay within one of them for now, and make sure we provide real true value in that swim lane before we move on from there.
Yes, I think that part's fascinating as well. I've seen and interacted with organizations that are trying to leverage FP&A even into capacity and resource planning, and trying to figure out what that looks like. And especially with what's going on in the world today, right? With certainly high inflation and certainly supply chain challenges, the need for this kind of capability, I think, is dire, right? I think having the ability to provide something like this sooner rather than later is really crucial.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the technology has the ability to hold much more context and see data across. One of the things that platforms like ours can do in a compliant and anonymized way is you can see data patterns across different companies. Mm-hmm. So you can inform yourself more than just looking at your own data, sitting inside your own office and your own silo. So that will in the future greatly help with capacity planning or cost reduction initiatives and so on. So I think that's one of the powers of sort of like the cloud combined with AI and big data, if it's leveraged in the right way.
And so if I go back just one moment on something, so if we take an AI model and we take it through a data set, And we were able to get sort of two key views at it. One is sort of more hindsight, right? One sort of looking backwards, right? It's the AI is looking at it saying, here were the drivers that that contributed to the certain behavior, right? And so it's more analytical, right? But then there's the other style of using it, which is looking forward, which is more predictive. And okay, here's where, based on things we've seen, here's what the high predictive sort of correlations or opportunities or things that we expect moving in the future. When you look at Vic AI and everything that you're providing, do you focus more on one side versus the other, or are you combining both of those views together?
Yeah, so in the course of the work in the platform we have now, so everything we do is a prediction on new data. So that means so if you sort of break it down a little, like there's a new signal or a new transaction or a new document coming in that we've never seen before. And the platform then predicts what this is, down to very like line item level detail, how to classify it and so on. So it does predict this based on the algorithmic design and the historical data that it's seen both for this customer and globally. So it's sort of our engines are purely predictive in terms of what they're trying to predict what's going on, and you can extend that to other parts, like we just discussed on the cost side as well. You can predict how you should maybe not just classify this cost, but like what your cost base should consist of when you look at categories, and you can sort of predict this based on your own current spend, your growth in the company, and maybe other comparable companies. So you can start predicting a journey based on the same technologies.
Awesome. So quick question for you. As COVID started to hit, obviously a couple of years ago, and large companies had their AI models, out there deployed and were running, suddenly that disruption created an impact to the way in which business was typically being done, right? Not all industries were hit, but certainly a lot of industries were hit. And therefore, business operations changed, and the way in which people conducted business altered, which meant then that those models were making assumptions based on former operational models, right? Former ways in which people executed, and therefore invalidated some of those predictive characteristics or capabilities of those models, which meant then, as you know, that they had to go do some rework, right? Had to do some retraining, right? And update the data sets and so forth. So to what degree does Vic AI continually learn, right? So as you pointed out, you get a new document you've never seen before. At some point, I'm assuming it pulls it into its corpus, right? And it continues to learn or relearn on that. Can you talk to that?
Yeah. And it's a key feature of the platform, which is actually pretty enjoyable when you see it working in reality. So so for every transaction that goes through our platform, or every invoice or vendor bill that is processed through our platform, that leaves us with some learnings. So it's corrected, and we made a prediction, and a human chose to change it. Right, that is something that is fed back into our data set, and also our learning database of sort of why would that ever happen? What did we get wrong in this prediction? And so for every prediction that we do, we learn something, because if we predict something and it's correct, we also learn something. So, we have millions of transactions just flowing through the system every month. And for each of them, we learn something. So the system then improves basically for each transaction that goes through the system. The level of, transaction processing we're at isn't really affected by kind of like global changes, like you mentioned for COVID. Like the only thing that could happen is you suddenly have some new transaction because you need to do something differently, or you may have fewer transaction, which then just is additive to our system. So we will get something. Maybe we'll have lower confidence on this because this is something new. So, you will have a human come in there and tell the system what to do with this, and then that will be additive to the data sets and the algorithmic design, if that makes sense.
It makes total sense. Absolutely. Yeah. And I loved how you tied the two together, which is, well, I'm still going to have the transaction, although the macro world around me is changing. The transaction occurs. What may change is the rate of them, or how, or maybe even the units or the number of units, et cetera. Right? Things like that will certainly or could change because of disruption. Being able to predict or understand how the organization can respond to disruption, I think, becomes more and more critical as we seem to continue to have more disruptions in business, right? That happens a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, what happened with COVID specifically was also a lot of disruption in how people worked, and they were used to working from home. And we have some of our customers, they have millions of invoices a year, which means like thousands of invoices a day. And suddenly you have your whole workforce is like not as productive as they were when something like this happens. But you still need your system to be updated. You still need to pay your vendors on time, and otherwise you'll incur fees. And so just like having an AI system in there that doesn't sort of care about those things, it has the same throughput and output 24/7 all year around, makes you very resilient for sort of things like that, or like workforce changes. So
that's the right word.
Cool to see.
That's the right word, resilient. You want that organizational resilience. And that's the point I wanted to drive out, which is, even though there's these disruptions that take place, most of which are outside of our control, getting our companies into a position to handle and respond properly or well to that, or to pivot, is what organizational resilience is about. And my experience has been AI is one of those tools to help us do that. Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, I want to ask you a very forward-looking question, right? You ready?
Yeah, sure.
All right. So I'm not going to ask what are you going to do in Norway. What I'm asking is, tell me about blockchain. What does that mean to you and your world and the things that you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, that's we've been thinking about that, and to be honest, we haven't really seen yet the connection between specifically what we do and how to leverage a blockchain effectively. I like the technology of a blockchain is really awesome, and it can unlock a lot of things, but it doesn't mean that you need to use it for everything. One thing that I think could be an interesting exploration is when you start looking at accounting ERP data, and whether the accounting systems could run and have their data in the blockchain that is verifiable to prevent all sorts of fickling with the data. That could be an interesting application for blockchain in our area. And there's clearly things around like money movement and value movement that a blockchain can solve pretty well. So just in the layer where we are, we haven't really found a great application that applies to us with the blockchain yet. But I think the technology is super fascinating. And I think that there are many areas where it is a superior technology to sort of like the trust-based system that we have now. And it's an epic thing when you can run that successfully in a trustless way.
When you think, and that makes a lot of sense, it's got some, as you pointed out, some interesting potential benefits to the industry. But I suppose at some point, it doesn't really matter where the transaction sits for you, right? In terms of the problem that you're solving, right? In other words, whether it's sitting on a blockchain or it's somewhere else in Oracle ERP or whatever, right? At some point, that probably doesn't matter, right?
Yeah, for us, the store of the sort of the store of the data ultimately is for us in the ERP system, and we are not an ERP system. We just layer on top of the ERP system, so that is the ultimate sort of storage of the data, and that's where, if at all, the like blockchain technology could be leveraged to kind of store data in a safe and transparent way. But there's also there's some transparency issues with accounting data as well that got to be kept in mind.
Yeah, I'd imagine that one of the greatest use cases too for what it is you provide is in the area of fraud detection, right? The ability to, regardless of where the data is sitting, and regardless if it's on a blockchain or in an ERP system, your AI, I would imagine, would help to discover or uncover some of those potential opportunities. Is that accurate?
Yeah. And you have this platform benefit as well. Is what if one customer sort of reports. So what happens a lot is just invoice fraud, right? You have invoices that are not from the vendor that they appear to be from, and you have different variations of trying to change payment details and all of that. So when you see data across thousands of customers, you have a way of detecting those things and at least flagging them for like, hey, someone should have an extra look at this because something may be up. If you're all good with it, that's fine, but have an extra look at this. And for people, when we as people, when we're doing something for 6 hours straight, the last few hours, we're just like, we're just clicking enter and trying to get the day over with.
Right.
And things can easily pass by that shouldn't pass by. So this is problematic in two ways. Number one, your accounting data could end up being wrong. Like you just have things that are misclassified. And then you could have things that are, paid. Either you pay it twice, or you pay the wrong thing, or you pay an extra zero. You have all of these things that are just it's easy for humans to do those mistakes. And you just want to sort of get rid of those with a technology that can help you remove all of those errors. And when you have, $1 billion cost base, just, 0.5% is quite a lot.
A big number. Yeah, it is. Yeah, and you'd hate to get false positives on a fraud situation, right? Where you might be accusing someone that they've conducted fraud when in fact it was just a mistake. This is fascinating technology. So, Alex, where do people go to? I mean, where can you point them to learn more about you and your organization?
Yeah, I mean, the website is the safest place to go right now. So just bic.ai. And we have a good bit of marketing collateral and informative collateral, blog posts. We try to educate the customers and the finance team. So finance teams are, interestingly, they're not buying new things that often because your ERP system, you have it for a very long time, which you definitely should. So you're not like a high. There's no high velocity necessarily on procuring things for the finance team. And we try to do a lot of educational material as well because AI is new, but it has true effects for the finance team. And you'll find blog posts and collateral, and can happily reach out to us, and we'll help guide anyone through the process.
Through that. Oh, okay, that's awesome, Alex. You've been so generous with your time here today, especially as you're getting ready to jet off into the sunrise. Just real quick, any last comments that you want to share?
I think this has been a cool chat. It's been real good. I love talking about, of course, AI and our company, but also the technologies in general. So I think this has been super cool, and I think that it's just wanted to say that we've spent a long time building the platform so that it's not complex for the customers, right? You have all of the AI performance, which is actually mind-blowing, but you have none of the complexity. So, if you want to get started with AI for a function, this is a very specific function within invoice processing where you can deploy AI, get the effects out of it with no complexities, and we'll deal with all of that for you.
That's actually the beauty of this, to be able to get that down to a few mouse point clicks on a SaaS solution. They have all that taken care of. I've written my share of AI code, and oh my goodness, the fact that you've handled that so seamlessly for the business people is huge. Nice job. Really great job on that. Yeah.
Thanks, Grant. Appreciate it.
Thanks for taking the time today again,
Sure.
Alex. My gosh, this is awesome. Everyone, thanks for listening to another episode of ClickAI Radio. And until next time, go check out vic.ai.
Thank you for joining Grant on ClickAI Radio. Don't forget to subscribe and leave feedback. And remember to download your free ebook. Visit clickairadio.com now.